The Galactic Council Hall was one of the largest structures in known space. It stretched like a silver dome across the skies of Orion Prime, shining under the light of 3 suns. Within its walls, hundreds of alien delegates sat in tiered seats that curved like the rings of a great amphitheater. Voices in a dozen languages echoed through the hall, overlapping in fear and panic. The news had come only hours ago. The Drexar swarm had broken through the last frontier lines. Worlds that once stood proud were now nothing more than ashes drifting in space. The swarm consumed everything: metal, stone, living creatures, and ecosystems. They left nothing behind but silence. For centuries, the Drexar had been more of a story than a threat. Their attacks were rare and usually far away, hidden at the edge of maps. Now they were here, moving toward the heart of the galaxy. At the center of the chamber, a tall insectoid delegate named Counselor Virex slammed his claws against the speaking table. His voice trembled as it translated into the common tongue. They cannot be stopped. The swarm grows stronger with every system it devours. To fight them is to throw lives away.
We must evacuate.
We must run while there is still time. Murmurs of agreement spread. Reptilian envoys nodded their heads. Avian leaders spread their wings uneasily. Entire rows of delegates whispered about fleets being recalled and colonies being abandoned. The council chamber, once a place of order, felt like a nest of frightened birds. Yet in the lower seats near the front, the humans sat quietly. They were fewer in number, their delegation modest compared to older species. Humanity was still considered young in the galactic stage. Their technology was not as advanced, their fleets not as large. But unlike the others, they did not tremble. The human representative, Admiral Sophia Rains, stood slowly. Her dark uniform bore no ornament except the small silver emblem of Earth. Her voice was calm but firm, and it carried farther than most expected. You suggest abandoning billions of lives, she said, scanning the hall. If every species runs, the swarm will only follow. They will reach your homeworlds, your skies, your children. You cannot run forever. A wave of dismissive hisses and laughter broke out. One delegate, a tall crystalline being, rose to respond. Young humans speak bravely because they do not understand what they face, the crystalline voice rang. You are reckless. Your fleets are small, your colonies scattered. You cannot hope to stand where greater empires have already fallen. Admiral Rains did not flinch. She knew such words would come. But before she could reply, another voice rose from the human seats, a younger voice, filled with fire. Captain Elias Ward, barely in his 30s, had insisted on attending the council as part of the human defense delegation. His eyes burned with determination as he stepped forward. Perhaps our fleets are small, Ward said. Perhaps we lack the thousands of years of history and the endless resources that some of you claim. But we understand something that you do not. He paused, letting his gaze travel across the sea of fearful faces. The Drexar do not stop. They do not negotiate. If we give ground, they will take it. If we run, they will chase us. The only chance is to make them bleed, to fight them here now before they reach the heart of the galaxy. His words silenced the chamber for a heartbeat. But then came more laughter, more scoffing. The avian delegate flapped his wings. Fight them? You are children standing before a storm. Your bravery is nothing but foolishness. Even as they mocked, Ward stood tall. His voice rose again, sharp and unyielding. Maybe you think we are foolish, but when the storm reaches you, remember this moment. Remember that humanity stood its ground when everyone else chose to run. The chamber erupted into noise again, some voices angry, others uncertain. The council session soon dissolved into chaos, with plans for evacuation being drawn while others argued. The humans left the hall together, their footsteps echoing on the polished floor. Outside, in the wide plaza under the alien suns, Ward's frustration finally broke free. They won't listen, he muttered. They'll abandon half the galaxy without lifting a hand. Entire civilizations left to die. Admiral Rains placed a steady hand on his shoulder. Her voice, though weary, carried resolve. Then let them. We cannot control their fear. But humanity will not run. We will fight. And when the others see that the swarm can be resisted, perhaps they will join us. Until then, we hold the line alone. Ward nodded, though the weight of her words pressed heavily on his chest. Alone, that was the truth. Humanity would face the swarm without allies. The next weeks were filled with frantic preparations. On Earth and across its colonies, industry burned day and night. Shipyards worked without pause, turning out warships, supply vessels, and defensive platforms. Civilians volunteered in droves, some signing up for the fleet, others joining engineering corps to build fortifications. In the outer colonies, fear was real, but so was determination. Unlike other species that evacuated, humans built bunkers, orbital defenses, and planetary shields. Farmers became soldiers. Miners became builders of weapons. Children watched the skies and learned what it meant to stand their ground. Captain Ward found himself at the heart of these preparations. He was placed in command of a newly assembled strike group, a collection of cruisers and destroyers meant to serve as the spearhead of humanity's first defense. His ship, the Resolute, became both his burden and his hope. Every report from scouts painted the same picture. The Drexer swarm moved closer. Their ships were like living creatures, dark, jagged forms that writhed and twisted in space. They traveled in endless waves, consuming whatever they touched. Colonies of other species vanished overnight, leaving only wreckage. And yet, as the danger grew nearer, so too did humanity's resolve. Messages spread across their networks, simple words that became a vow. Stand your ground. It was not a grand slogan. It was not polished or poetic, but it carried meaning. It was a promise to every child, every worker, every soldier. Humanity would not run. Back at the Galactic Council, weeks later, fear had only grown worse. Delegates argued over which safe worlds to flee to. Fleets withdrew deeper and deeper. The words of Captain Ward lingered in their minds, but few admitted it. Most thought the humans would vanish like the others, but then the reports came. A human fleet had assembled at Corin Ridge, a narrow system guarding the routes to several populated sectors. Instead of retreating, they had dug in. They were waiting for the Drexar. The council laughed again at the news. But somewhere in the hearts of even the most fearful delegates, a question flickered. Could it be possible? Could this young, reckless species truly stand where so many had fallen? No one dared to answer. But on the bridge of the Resolute, Captain Ward already knew. The storm was coming, and humanity would face it head-on. The stars over Corin Ridge looked calm, almost peaceful, but every human aboard the ship stationed there knew peace was an illusion. Beyond the far edge of the system, the Drexar swarm moved closer each day. Their endless fleets had crushed empires that once boasted of their power. Now they were coming for humanity. Captain Elias Ward stood on the bridge of the Resolute, his eyes fixed on the glowing tactical display. Around him, officers moved quickly between their stations. The hum of the ship was steady, but beneath it all there was tension in the air. Status of the fleet? Ward asked. Commander Hale, his second-in-command, answered firmly. We have 42 ships in total. Cruisers, destroyers, and a handful of older frigates. Orbital mines are being deployed across the ridge. Defense satellites are online. We've prepared everything, Captain. Ward gave a short nod. It was not much compared to the endless swarm that was coming, but it was what humanity had. And if this fleet fell, there would be nothing between the Drexar and dozens of inhabited systems. News of humanity's decision to fight had spread quickly across the galaxy. But instead of admiration, most species responded with disbelief. On Orion Prime, the Galactic Council argued endlessly. Some laughed at the humans, predicting they would be destroyed in their first engagement. Others shook their heads with pity, saying humanity did not understand what they faced. Only a few quiet voices wondered if perhaps the humans were right. But the humans did not wait for approval. They built traps, mined asteroids, and positioned their ships like shields across the narrow lanes of Corin Ridge. The system was a natural choke point, the perfect place to slow the enemy. If they failed here, at least the galaxy would know the Drexar could be resisted. On the eve of the battle, Ward walked through the ship. He passed engineering bays where mechanics worked with tired eyes, checking power lines and weapon systems again and again. He passed the mess hall where soldiers sat in silence, writing last messages to loved ones. In the hangar, pilots ran checks on their starfighters. One young pilot, no more than 20, saluted as Ward walked past. Captain, the pilot said quietly, do you think we can really stop them? Ward paused, studying the youth's nervous face. Then he answered with steady conviction, we will stop them here, not because we are stronger, but because we refuse to run. Remember that. Stand your ground, and you'll give others the courage to do the same. The pilot straightened, his fear replaced with determination. Ward moved on, knowing his words mattered more than he realized. The next day, alarms rang across the Resolute. Sensors detected movement at the edge of the system. "They're here," Commander Hale reported. His voice was calm, but his eyes betrayed the gravity of the moment. Ward turned to the crew. "Signal the fleet. All ships to battle stations. This is humanity's first stand." The view screens lit up with the first images of the Drexar. Their ships were monstrous, living shadows that twisted unnaturally as they moved. They looked less like machines and more like predators drifting through space, and there were so many, more than the human fleet had ever faced. The battle began with silence, broken only by the hum of energy weapons charging. Then, in a storm of light, the humans opened fire. From the flanks, orbital mines detonated, ripping through the first wave of Drexar ships. Asteroid fields, carefully rigged with explosives, collapsed into the enemy's path. Human destroyers darted between larger cruisers, launching torpedoes and retreating behind their shields. For every Drexar ship destroyed, 3 more emerged. Their weapons glowed like burning suns, tearing through human defenses. 2 frigates exploded in the first hour, their crews lost in the void. But the humans did not break. Ward stood tall on the bridge, giving sharp, clear orders. "Redirect power to shields. Rotate the formation. Keep them focused on our center. Launch fighter wings, harass their flanks." His voice carried strength, and the crew obeyed with precision. Though they were outnumbered, their tactics made every ship count. As the hours dragged on, the battle became a brutal test of endurance. Human pilots sacrificed themselves to buy time for their comrades. Ships with failing engines turned themselves into battering rams, crashing into Drexar vessels to take them down. Every loss was painful, yet every sacrifice slowed the swarm. In the command chambers of distant species, leaders watched the reports in disbelief. The humans were not being crushed in minutes as expected. They were holding. Their smaller fleet had already destroyed hundreds of Drexar ships. Still, the price was high. By the 12th hour of battle, nearly half the human fleet was gone. Fires burned aboard the Resolute. Smoke filled the corridors, and medical bays overflowed with the wounded. Commander Hale turned to Ward, his face grim. "We can't hold much longer." Ward's voice was steady, even as exhaustion weighed on him. "Then we fight until the last ship." We knew this would not be easy. Then a chance appeared. Sensors detected a massive Drexar cluster moving directly toward the central defense line. If it broke through, the remaining human fleet would collapse. But Ward had anticipated this. "Activate the decoy beacons," he ordered. Across the battlefield, hidden devices lit up, broadcasting signals that mimicked the energy of human ships. The Drexar swerved toward the false targets, crashing headlong into a hidden minefield. The explosion tore through their formation, destroying dozens of ships in a single strike. Cheers erupted across the Resolute. For a moment, hope shone brightly. Humanity had not only survived, they had forced the Drexar to adapt. For the first time in known history, the swarm had been delayed. By the time the Drexar finally withdrew, the battlefield was littered with wreckage. Human ships drifted, some barely operational. The Resolute's hull was scarred, its engines damaged, but it still stood. Ward looked around at his exhausted crew. Their uniforms were torn, their faces smeared with ash, but their eyes glowed with pride. "Send word to Earth," he said softly. "Tell them humanity stood its ground at Corin Ridge." News traveled faster than the swarm itself. Across the galaxy, species who had mocked the humans fell silent. The impossible had happened. The Drexar had been slowed. Humanity had done what no one else dared. In refugee camps, whispers spread. "The humans are fighting back." On council worlds, leaders shifted uneasily. For the first time in generations, the Drexar had been stopped, even if only for a moment. And on Earth, people lit candles in windows, honoring the lives lost, but also celebrating the courage that had carried them through. Captain Ward stood alone on the observation deck of the Resolute, gazing at the stars. Behind him, the galaxy still doubted. The swarm would come again, stronger than before. Humanity would bleed again. But he knew one truth with absolute certainty. When every other species ran, humanity had stood their ground. And they would continue to do so until the last star burned out or until victory was won. The stars outside the bridge of the Resolute burned cold and distant, indifferent to the struggle of a single young species, standing against the galaxy's deadliest threat. Yet for Captain Elias Ward and his crew, every pulse of light mattered. Each star represented hope, life, and the reason they fought. Weeks had passed since the battle at Corin Ridge. Humanity's victory, or survival, as Ward preferred to call it, had been costly. Nearly half the fleet had been lost, thousands of soldiers and pilots gone, but their stand had bought the galaxy a precious gift: time. Word of the human stand traveled faster than even the fastest couriers. Across distant systems, species that had abandoned their homes paused to watch. Doubt crept into their fear-driven decisions. Could it be possible that the young humans had discovered a way to resist the unstoppable Drexar? On Earth, the mood was solemn but resolute. Repair crews worked non-stop to rebuild ships, engineers developed stronger weapons, and strategists studied every detail of Corin Ridge. Civilian volunteers filled every role imaginable: communications, logistics, medical support, even defense drills. Humanity had learned a painful lesson. Survival was not a luxury. It was a duty shared by everyone. Captain Ward moved among the crews, inspecting repairs and speaking quietly to those who had lost friends. He did not offer empty comfort. Instead, he reminded them why they had survived. "We are not just fighting for ourselves," he said. "We are showing the galaxy that courage matters, that even the impossible can be resisted if we stand together." Meanwhile, in the darker corners of space, the Drexar observed humanity with curiosity. Unlike other species, humans did not flee. They did not scatter. They were unpredictable, resourceful, and willing to take risks the swarm had never encountered before. This drew the attention of the swarm's commanders, or what could be called commanders, for the Drexar were more like a collective intelligence than a traditional army. It would not be long before they returned. The first signs came from a mining colony on the outskirts of the Helios sector. Sensors picked up unusual activity. The Drexar were moving faster than before, concentrating their fleets in tight formations. Human intelligence teams worked day and night, mapping every signal, every movement. Ward and Admiral Sophia Raines, the chief strategist, convened in the command tent of a rebuilt cruiser. "The Drexar are learning," Raines said. Her finger traced lines of movement on the holographic display. "They've adapted their formation since Corin Ridge. They are faster, more coordinated, and they are targeting our supply lines first." Ward's jaw tightened. "We expected that. We have to be ready, and we have to hit them before they consolidate. If they reach Helios front, thousands of systems are at risk." Raines nodded. "We'll need sacrifices, Captain. Not everyone will survive the next engagement." Ward's eyes did not waver. "Then we make it count. Every life lost will slow them. Every life lost will be meaningful." As the human fleets prepared, other species began to notice. Rumors of humanity's resilience spread. Small delegations, once fleeing to distant safe zones, sent emissaries offering supplies, information, or limited fleet support. Though tentative, it was the first recognition that humanity's stand could inspire cooperation. Yet humans did not rely on this. They could not. Every ship, every soldier, every civilian counted. The battle ahead would test not just their courage, but the very core of their civilization. The Drexar attack arrived at dawn in the Helios sector. From the command bridge of the Resolute, Ward watched the shadowy mass of enemy vessels emerging from hyperspace. Their numbers seemed endless, dark shapes stretching across the void like a river of night. "Deploy the frontline mines," Ward ordered. "Position the frigates along the outer perimeter. Fighters, scramble." The human fleet moved with precise coordination. Though vastly outnumbered, they relied on intelligence, tactics, and unshakable resolve. Ships weaved through asteroid belts using terrain to their advantage. Fighters harassed the flanks, darting between the enemy like fireflies in the dark. The first clash was brutal. Drexar energy beams carved through shields, reducing ships to drifting wrecks. Human pilots screamed in warning as their comrades fell. Yet they pressed on, exploiting weaknesses in the swarm's formations. Hours turned into days. Humanity's fleet was not large enough to destroy the Drexar outright, but they could slow them. And that was exactly what they did. Captain Ward moved constantly from station to station, coordinating attacks, encouraging crews, and making impossible decisions under pressure. He watched as young pilots faced monsters beyond comprehension and still pressed the attack. He saw engineers risk their lives to repair damaged ships in the middle of combat. Civilians, trained only in basic operations, manned gun platforms and communications, keeping the fleet alive. "They are stronger than we imagined," one officer reported breathlessly, "and yet we are holding them back." Ward's voice was calm, steady. "Then we hold them longer. They may be many, but we have something they do not. Determination. Courage. We fight not just to survive, but to inspire. Stand your ground. Every action matters. In the void, small victories accumulated. The human fleet drew the Drexar into collapsing asteroid fields, detonating carefully timed explosives that destroyed entire formations. Boarding parties and smaller crafts disabled Drexar command vessels, cutting off communication between sections of the swarm. Each success came at a cost. Hundreds of lives were lost, entire frigates were destroyed, and countless weapons were spent. Yet the effect was undeniable. For the first time, the Drexar hesitated. Their advance was slowed, their confidence shaken. Across the galaxy, species that had fled paused to observe. They had doubted humans, mocked them, and yet here they were, standing firm in the face of an unstoppable force. Amid the chaos, personal stories emerged. Lieutenant Mara Voss, a communications officer barely out of training, coordinated messages between fleeing civilian transports and battle fleets. She saved thousands by directing them through safe routes, even as her own ship was under fire. Engineer Diego Tran improvised repairs on the Resolute, keeping weapons online even after several critical systems failed. His hands were blackened with oil and plasma burns, but he never hesitated. And Captain Ward? He carried the weight of all of them. Every life lost, every ship destroyed, every strategy tested, it was his responsibility. And yet he never let despair show. We cannot afford despair, he reminded his crew. The galaxy is watching. And more than that, we must never forget why we fight. Courage spreads like fire, and the flame of humanity burns bright. The final hours of the engagement at Helios Front were the most intense. Drexar forces, realizing the humans had learned their patterns, unleashed their most dangerous strategies. Ships moved in synchronized waves, cutting through asteroid belts, firing in precision barrages. But humanity was ready. Fleet commanders used every advantage, terrain, decoys, and unexpected counterattacks. Pilots sacrificed themselves to draw the Drexar into traps. Ships with failing engines were turned into battering rams, crashing into enemy lines to break formations. When the swarm finally withdrew, their numbers reduced and morale shaken. The human fleet had survived. The victory was not complete, but it was decisive. For the first time, the Drexar would think twice before underestimating a species that refused to run. News of the stand at Helios Front reached every human colony. People cheered, but they also mourned. Thousands were lost. Heroes who would never return to see the lives they had saved. Families wept, yet pride tempered grief. Humanity had survived not by luck, but by courage, skill, and unity. Captain Ward stood once more on the observation deck of the Resolute. Stars stretched endlessly around him, but they no longer seemed indifferent. They bore witness to what a determined species could accomplish. Admiral Rains joined him silently. She handed him a tablet filled with messages from other species, many timid, some mocking, but some curious, even hopeful. "They are watching," she said softly. "Some will join us next time. Others will at least consider standing rather than running." Ward nodded. "We've started something bigger than ourselves. The Drexar may be relentless, but so are we. Humanity's fire has been lit, and it will burn as long as we stand." And so humanity's legend spread further. The galaxy began to see them differently, not as reckless children, but as a symbol of courage. A young species, small in number, had faced the darkness and had not fled. Their stand inspired hope in hearts that had long forgotten it. Yet in the shadows of space, the Drexar regrouped. Their collective intelligence analyzed every mistake, every tactic, every human stand. They would return, stronger and more cunning than ever. Humanity, however, did not wait for fear. They prepared, trained, and learned. The fire of courage that had burned at Corin Ridge and Helios Front now spread across every colony, every ship, every heart. And as Captain Ward looked to the stars, he knew the next battle would come. But humanity would be ready. They would fight. They would endure. They would continue to stand. Because when every species ran, humanity stood their ground. The galaxy was changing. Where once fear had driven species to flee before the Drexar swarm, now whispers of humanity's courage traveled faster than any fleet. Corin Ridge and Helios Front had become legends, stories of small ships and brave humans delaying an unstoppable enemy. Captain Elias Ward stood on the bridge of the Resolute, watching the flow of messages from distant systems. Many were requests for information. Some were offers of help, ships, technology, supplies. Though tentative, it was the first sign that the galaxy might finally unite. Admiral Sophia Rains joined him, her expression thoughtful. "They're watching us closely," she said. "Some species are willing to contribute. Others are hesitant. But all are considering if humans can hold, maybe they can too." Ward nodded. "We've shown them what courage looks like. Now we have to make sure they act on it." The first to step forward was the Seraphines, an avian species from the outer systems. Their emissary, a tall figure with golden plumage and eyes that gleamed like suns, had arrived with a small fleet of scout ships. "We have watched your stand at Helios Front," the Seraphine leader said. "Our ancestors fled before the Drexar, and we have hidden for too long. But if humanity is willing to fight, so are we. Teach us your tactics. Let us fight beside you." Ward and Rains exchanged a glance. This was unprecedented. The Seraphines were skilled pilots, renowned for their speed and agility in space combat. Having them on their side could tip the balance. "Then welcome," Ward said simply. "You fight with us. The galaxy will remember this moment." Other species followed. A small faction of crystalline beings sent their engineers to help repair ships and strengthen defenses. Even a few aquatic species, previously hidden in the depths of water worlds, contributed fleets adapted for maneuvering through asteroid belts and nebulae. It was not a perfect alliance. Old grudges simmered beneath the surface. Species that had once abandoned colonies hesitated to trust humans. Humans, in turn, were wary of relying on help from those who had fled before, but necessity forced them to cooperate. For Ward, this was just another part of leadership. He focused on the task at hand, coordinating a joint fleet to defend critical sectors against the inevitable return of the Drexar. The next major target of the swarm was predicted: Fortress Earth. Humanity's homeworld was a jewel of resources, knowledge, and population. If the Drexar breached it, the entire human network of colonies could collapse. Every available ship was mobilized. Fleet officers worked alongside alien commanders, sharing tactics and forming integrated strike groups. It was a logistical challenge unlike any other. Orders had to be translated across dozens of languages. Ship systems were incompatible. Pilots were trained in different maneuvers. Yet the urgency of the Drexar threat drove them forward. "Coordination is key," Rains reminded them in a briefing. "We must act as one. Confusion will be our undoing. Remember, courage is important, but precision will save lives." Ward looked around the room. Soldiers, engineers, and alien allies all listened intently. "We fight together," he said. "Not as humans or seraphines or crystal beings, but as defenders of life itself. Stand your ground. The galaxy watches, and we will not falter." As the fleet moved into position around Earth, reconnaissance revealed the true scale of the Drexar assault. Thousands of ships were moving in synchronized formations. Their dark hulls blotted out stars. Energy signatures pulsed like a heartbeat, sending shivers through the sensors. "This is larger than Helios Front," one officer reported. "They've learned. They've adapted." Ward's eyes narrowed. "Then we must adapt faster. Set the minefields at the outer edges. Fighters in rapid strike formation. Cruiser lines ready for synchronized volleys. We hold no matter what." The first clash began with a volley of plasma from the Drexar, striking at the outermost human ships. Explosions lit up the darkness of space and debris floated between the stars. Humanity's fleet responded immediately, concentrating fire on the advancing enemy. The battle was chaos. Ships darted and swirled, lasers streaking across the void. Boarding parties engaged Drexar vessels, while smaller craft disabled enemy weapons. Explosions rocked the fleet, but coordination between humans and their new allies prevented total collapse. Captain Ward moved from station to station, giving orders, inspiring crews, and making split-second decisions. Every choice mattered. A delay or misstep could mean the loss of a sector or the death of thousands. In one engagement, a squadron of Seraphine fighters flew into the heart of the Drexar formation. Using their speed and agility, they created openings for human cruisers to strike. Lieutenant Mara Voss, now a veteran of 2 battles, coordinated communications across the fleets. Her calm voice guided ships safely through the chaos. Engineer Diego Tran worked tirelessly in the engine room of the Resolute, keeping main thrusters operational despite repeated hits from Drexar energy blasts. His efforts allowed the ship to maneuver and continue delivering precise volleys of fire. For the first time, Humans were not alone in the fight. Their allies brought skills, technology, and courage that complemented human ingenuity, yet the losses were still heavy. Thousands of soldiers and civilians alike were caught in explosions, boarding actions, and collapsing stations, and still, the fleet pressed forward. Ward addressed his crew across every channel, his voice steady and commanding. Remember why we fight. Stand your ground. Every action counts. Every sacrifice slows the enemy. Humanity has not stood alone for long, but we are stronger together. We endure, we fight, we survive. The words were not just for humans, they reached every alien ally, giving hope to those who had long lived in fear. Courage, Ward knew, was contagious. As the battle stretched into days, the Drexar forces began to falter in unexpected ways. They were learning, but humanity and their allies were learning faster. Coordinated ambushes, feints, and traps slowed the swarm's advance. Every destroyed Drexar ship reduced the pressure on Earth and its surrounding colonies. In the command tent, Admiral Rains displayed a tactical map to Ward and the alien commanders. They underestimate collaboration, she explained. They do not expect different species to act as one. We exploit that advantage. We can force them into corridors where we control the field. Ward studied the map, nodding. Then we use it. Hold every choke point. Protect every colony. Stand together no matter what. The turning point came when the Drexar attempted to break through the main defense ring. Hundreds of ships moved in tight formation toward Earth. Human and Seraphine fighters intercepted them, drawing them into asteroid fields rigged with explosives. Crystal engineers activated massive energy beams, slicing through enemy ships. The combined fleet's actions turned the tide. The Drexar, confused by coordinated resistance, were forced to retreat, though not completely. The battle had bought Earth time, and the galaxy had witnessed something extraordinary. Across communication channels, reports from other systems revealed a shift. Species who had fled now hesitated to run. Some even began mobilizing their own fleets. Humanity's courage had sparked something larger than a single stand. It had awakened the possibility of united resistance. When the battle finally subsided, Ward and Rains met on the observation deck of the Resolute. Below, Earth glowed like a jewel. Ships repaired themselves in orbit, and distant colonies sent messages of relief. They are watching, Rains said softly. Some will join. Others will at least reconsider fleeing next time. Ward nodded, his gaze fixed on the stars. We have done more than survive. We have shown that courage can unite the galaxy. But this is only the beginning. The Drexar will return stronger, and when they do, we will be ready. He turned to the assembled allies, each representing a different species. Together we are a force they cannot ignore. Humanity stood its ground, and now the galaxy stands with us. Remember this. Remember why we fight. A quiet murmur of agreement spread through the room. It was not just hope, it was determination. A young species, once doubted and mocked, had inspired an entire galaxy to rise. As darkness fell over the stars, Ward watched the void. The Drexar were still out there, their numbers vast and terrifying. But humanity and their allies had proven one truth: courage, unity, and the will to fight could change the course of destiny. The fire that began at Corin Ridge now burned brighter than ever, and when the next wave came, humanity would not face it alone. Because for the first time, the galaxy understood that standing together could make even the darkest voids of space bright with hope. The stars above Fortress Earth were brighter than usual, though that brightness could not hide the scars of countless battles. The human fleet had rebuilt, stronger than ever, yet the weight of what was to come pressed heavily on every officer, pilot, and soldier. The Drexar swarm, relentless and intelligent, was massing once more. This time it aimed directly for the heart of humanity's defenses. Captain Elias Ward stood on the bridge of the Resolute, flanked by Admiral Sophia Rains and representatives of the allied species. Their combined fleets formed a protective ring around Earth, a living shield of determination. For weeks, intelligence teams had mapped the swarm's likely approach, and now the moment of truth had arrived. The Drexar are approaching from multiple vectors, reported Lieutenant Mara Voss, her voice calm but urgent. Sensors show hundreds of thousands of ships moving faster than before. They have learned from our previous encounters. Ward's gaze did not waver. Then we fight smarter, harder, and together. Every species, every ship, every fighter counts. Humanity did not run before, and we will not run now. The Allied fleets moved into position. Seraphine squadrons took the high orbit flanks, weaving through asteroid belts for speed and surprise. Crystal engineers coordinated with human gunners to focus fire on the heaviest Drexar ships. Aquatic fleets, adapted for maneuvering through debris fields, patrolled the lower sectors, intercepting enemy flanking maneuvers. Across the fleet, the mood was tense but resolute. Pilots, engineers, and soldiers knew the stakes. Failure was unthinkable. Earth's survival, and perhaps the survival of countless other worlds, depended on their stand. Ward activated the main comms. "Remember why we fight. Stand your ground. Protect every colony, every life. The galaxy watches, and it will remember those who do not flee." The words echoed through ships and stations alike, binding humans and allies together in a single purpose. The battle began with a deafening roar of energy. Drexar vessels struck like tidal waves, overwhelming the first line of defense. Human cruisers took heavy hits, but coordinated counterattacks from Allied ships prevented a collapse. Fighter wings darted through the chaos, striking vulnerable points in the enemy formations. Captain Ward directed the engagement with precision. "Divide the swarm," he ordered. "Use asteroid fields and nebulae to funnel them. Focus fire on command nodes. Keep the perimeter intact." Explosions lit up the void as ships collided, beams of energy tearing through hulls. The Drexar were stronger and more organized than ever, but humanity and their allies were ready. Years of preparation, study, and sacrifice culminated in this moment. In one critical maneuver, a squadron of Seraphine fighters, guided by human navigators, drew a massive Drexar formation into a corridor lined with mines and hidden energy traps. The resulting explosion destroyed hundreds of enemy vessels at once, a blow that slowed the swarm and boosted the morale of the defenders. On the Resolute, Ward watched the feed with grim satisfaction. "Excellent work," he said quietly. "Keep pushing. Every success counts." Amid the chaos, small acts of bravery unfolded everywhere. Engineer Diego Tran improvised repairs under fire, keeping a damaged cruiser operational. Civilians in orbiting stations coordinated supply drops and shield reactivations, allowing frontline fighters to continue their attacks. Lieutenant Maravos guided evacuations of damaged colonies, ensuring that thousands of civilians reached safety. It was a battle fought not just with weapons, but with courage, ingenuity, and unity. Hours turned into days. Drexar forces regrouped, striking again and again. The fleet was battered, but it never broke. Humans and their allies adapted to every new tactic, anticipating moves, countering threats, and turning the swarm's strength against itself. In a crucial moment, the Drexar attempted to breach Earth's inner defenses. Hundreds of ships pressed toward the planet, their weapons blazing. Ward saw an opportunity. "Prepare the final strike," he ordered. "We take the fight to the swarm's core command. This ends here, or we all fall together." Using intelligence gathered during previous engagements, humans and allies executed a daring maneuver. The Resolute led a strike team directly into the Drexar command cluster. Accompanying ships coordinated attacks from every side, striking simultaneously and preventing the swarm from regrouping. Explosions erupted across the enemy formation. Drexar command nodes were destroyed, communications collapsed, and their coordinated assaults faltered. For the first time, the swarm faltered in fear, not instinct but confusion. Humanity's courage had forced them into disorder. Victory came at a cost. Thousands of human and allied ships were lost. Countless lives sacrificed. Entire squadrons vanished in the void. Yet the result was undeniable. The Drexar were crippled. Their fleet scattered, their ability to organize destroyed. Earth and its colonies were safe, for now. Ward surveyed the aftermath. The galaxy had watched. Humanity, once doubted and mocked, had led the charge, inspiring countless species to stand and fight. Admiral Rains approached him, her face lined with exhaustion and relief. "We did it," she said softly. "We actually did it." Ward shook his head. "We did not do it alone. Every ally, every soldier, every civilian contributed. Humanity stood its ground, yes, but the galaxy stood with us, and together we survived." The aftermath of the battle was both quiet and profound. Across human colonies, people celebrated cautiously. Messages of hope and admiration arrived from species who had once fled in terror. The Galactic Council, which had doubted humanity, now convened in solemn recognition. The council chamber had changed. Where fear and mockery once ruled, there was now respect. Delegates who had abandoned colonies now bowed in acknowledgement of the courage that had saved billions. Humans, young in the eyes of the galaxy, were now seen as leaders, examples, and symbols of hope. Ward attended the council as humanity's representative. Standing before the assembly, he spoke simply but firmly. "We did not fight for glory nor for power. We fought because it was right. Every species has a choice when faced with fear. We chose to stand. Humanity stands not for itself alone, but for the protection of life, for the preservation of hope. Let this be a lesson. Courage is contagious, and together no threat is too great." The chamber was silent. Then slowly a ripple of acknowledgement spread. It was not applause. It was recognition, respect earned through blood, effort, and unshakable resolve. In the quiet of space, Captain Ward reflected on the journey. From the first stand at Corin Ridge, to the desperate battles at Helios Front, and finally the combined defense of Fortress Earth, humanity had grown. Not in technology alone, but in spirit. They had proven that even a young, small species could inspire a galaxy, could change the tide of events through courage, strategy, and unity. The Drexar, while not fully destroyed, were diminished. They would take years to rebuild, and by then, humanity and their allies would be ready. The galaxy now knew that running was not the only option. Standing together could change destiny. Across human colonies, families lit candles in honor of those lost and in celebration of those who survived. Ships repaired, soldiers rested, and pilots shared stories of bravery and sacrifice. Ward watched the stars, thinking of the young pilot who had asked him months ago if humanity could really stop the Drexar. The answer was clear now. Humanity could, and they had. Years later, Captain Ward stood at a memorial on Earth, surrounded by survivors, families, and representatives of allied species. Names of the fallen were etched in silver across a black stone, shining under the twin suns. Children who had been born during the wars now played nearby, unaware of the sacrifices that made their lives possible. A Seraphine pilot, now a close friend and ally, stood beside him. "You taught us courage," she said softly. "Not just humans, but the galaxy. We will not forget it." Ward smiled, placing a hand on the memorial. "No species stands alone. Courage spreads. Hope survives. Humanity stood its ground, and because of that, countless worlds still shine. The galaxy had changed forever. Humanity, once a young and underestimated species, had become a symbol of hope, unity, and courage. Where others had fled, they had stood. Where others had feared, they had acted. And the fire of humanity's spirit, once ignited, would burn across the stars for generations to come. Because when every species ran, humanity stood their ground. And in standing, they had shown the universe what true courage could achieve.